Okay, so after years and years of waiting and speculating and hanging on to every little bit of information that comes out, the Wheel of Time show is finally here, and by the time this video comes out, it will have been a couple of weeks since the finale aired, and so here's my thoughts on it. Overall, I'd say it's pretty good. Also, yes, I finally have a green screen now. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. I don't know what's gonna be playing in the background here, and I think I might have too much light on it, so you'll probably see a little aura around me, but it's still there. Let's talk about Wheel of Time.
This is the introduction song. It's not very good, but it's not too long.
So, while I do think this show is good, it is just not a one-to-one adaptation. Like, it's not something that follows every event in the books and follows every character beat exactly the same, but it does still keep the overall story pretty much the same, and most of the world and the themes and the characters are pretty similar, even if they aren't exactly the same as they were on the page. Some of these changes, I would say, do improve upon the original book, because while I do like that series, it is deeply flawed. Some of these changes, I would say, make it a little bit worse, and some of them are just a lateral move. But in all cases, I think that they were necessary, because books and TV shows are different art forms, and writing for them requires different things, so sometimes you just have to change things around, not least of all because you just have less time to work with. For what it's worth, though, everyone I've seen who has watched the show who did not read the books, both in real life and online, most of them seem pretty satisfied with it so far. Like, they seem to be enjoying themselves, whereas people who have read the books, it's more of a mixed bag for us, and that ranges there's a whole gamut of opinions there, but like I said, I think it's pretty good. So I think I'll just go into the non-spoiler section of the review now.
Do you know what these parents would do to me if we canceled? I'd have to hear about little Billy and Susie, and there's not enough booze in my office.
So first things first, what did I like here? I think that the acting across the board is really, really solid. There are a few performances which are iffy and could have been better, but they're mostly for smaller characters which weren't around that much, so not a big deal. Among the main characters, there's some real standouts. Like Lan, for instance, great casting and great performance. Like, in terms of casting, yeah, that's what Lan looked like, so that's very good. But in terms of performance, he hits that line between being loyal and loving, but also being just icy cold and stoic. Like, it would be very easy to fall on one side of that line and just make him a complete emotionless robot, and you would just miss out on a lot of the depth that his character has, where he's lived a hard life, but he doesn't let that get him down. Like, he just refuses to give up in his fight against the Shadow, and he's continuing to do it despite how much he's lost over the years and how much he's suffered. But it would also be very, very easy to play him up as too emotional, and they managed to not do that. Matt, also, really good standout performance. Like, it's unfortunate that he had to be recast for season 2, but, I think the next guy will probably do fine. But in this season, Matt is, really clearly a funny guy and a loyal friend, but he also is a bit more of a darker character than he was in the books. Like, he seems a bit depressed here because he's had a more of a difficult life, and it kind of makes him a bit of an asshole. And I know that some people don't like that they change things because, some people just hate changes and adaptations, whether they're good or bad or anything like that. But honestly, in the first 2 books of the series, Matt just straight up does not have a personality, so any changes there are welcome as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I do really think they nailed how his character just seems to be depressed, really, because, he's had a difficult life so far, and he's using humor to cope with it. And while, yeah, he is kind of an asshole some of the time, he's not a terrible person overall. So I liked how they handled that. Rand is also a really decent guy, even if he's not super interesting at the beginning of the season, but he's under a lot of pressure. He is just a farm boy who was pulled out of his home and on this dangerous adventure, and so under the pressure he snaps sometimes. And for those of you who have read later on in the books, you know that that's going to be really important. And while I'm on the subject, I'm going to have a spoiler section of this review, but that's spoilers for this first season of the show. Like, I'm not going to be spoiling the rest of the books or anything. And if you're in the comments and you want to write spoilers about the later books, you can do that, but mark them, okay? If you do not mark them, your comment will be removed and you will be blocked from my channel. This is your one warning. And, other characters like Egwene and Nynaeve and Moiraine, they were all really, really solidly acted. In the main cast, I don't really have any major complaints about that. The real standouts, though, are the villains. Like, Eamon Valda, the White Cloak who had the chain of rings from Aes Sedai that he's killed over the years, he was appropriately creepy. He's a religious extremist who goes around killing people. That's a creepy concept, and I liked how they handled that. Padan Fain, it's just Padan Fain. They got that. They handled that well. And then, not going into spoilers here, but when we finally see the Dark One in the finale and he's talking and stuff, the actor they got for that, really, really, really good, really solid. And so just, yeah, all the villains. And you know what, actually, the Trollocs and the Fades, while they don't talk or anything, the actual physical acting that the people in the suits had to do works really well. They do seem, animalistic and scary, but there is still some intelligence there. So that's also really good. The villain acting throughout this whole show is just fantastic. The fight choreography is also great. We have characters using different weapons. We have characters at different skill levels. There's times where they fight multiple opponents. They incorporate magic into some of the bigger fights. And all of it's done really well. We don't have jump cuts or shaky cam or anything like that makes it hard to tell what's going on. Now, the only issue is that it is a bit dark at 1 or 2 points, but, you can adjust your TV and stuff. This is not Battle of Winterfell. You can adjust your TV to help fix that. So that's really impressive and really difficult to do, and I am super pleased that they managed to get that down. Rand fights differently than Tam, who fights differently than Lan, who fights differently from the other warders. It gets some of their character across in just the way they fight. And brief aside, when we see that fight at the beginning of episode 7, where there's a pregnant woman going into labor fighting dudes, that was just stupid. Okay, it was, well choreographed fight, exciting, it was easy to see what's going on, but it's just stupid. A woman in labor is not going to do that, guys. It also cuts out a lot of the inane traveling from the middle of the book, which, honestly, Eye of the World took me 3 tries to get through, specifically because that middle section with all the traveling just takes so long, and I hated it so much, and to this day, I still get nervous if characters in fantasy say, okay, we gotta travel to this place far away, because I just groan internally and think, oh great, they're gonna spend the rest of the book on this, and then by the time we get to the next one, maybe we'll get some progress on the story, maybe, but they cut a lot of that out here, not all of it, but a lot of the boring bits, and they just sort of made it yep, it's dangerous, there's dark friends and such around, so be aware of that, and they cut all that out. I'm happy with that. The shadow spawn in this are genuinely really scary. The Trollocs, especially at the end of the first episode when Winter Night happens and they're attacking there, you really feel yeah, this is what it would be like to just be some random villager who's in a town that is attacked by these crazy monsters. They look scary, they act scary, they are pretty hard to kill, and just overall, yeah, they work really well. I'm a little upset we didn't get to see the Fades in action, because as far as show watchers are concerned, they're just the dudes who lead the Trollocs, and they have no eyes and a lot of teeth, and well, we just don't get to see them do all that much. They're supposed to be 10 times worse than Trollocs, and we don't really see that, so that's a little upsetting. Although, I will say, after all this, I was watching a brief scene with my dad, and a Trolloc came on, and he said, hey, it's Man Bear Pig, and I think that every time I see it now. And I know some of you are probably thinking, wait, didn't James say his dad is dead? I'm referring to my stepfather here, so, kind of annoying that I have to specify that, but someone was going to bring it up. And probably most important of all, there aren't any major characters that are, really bitchy or annoying, which honestly wasn't the case in the books. Egwene, for instance, while I do love her character, especially for later on, the development she goes through, and, the contributions she makes to the story, and just all the crazy shit she does. She is a very good, well-written character, but at this beginning part, she's just, too controlling and bossy and just mean to Rand. To Rand and to everybody, really, but, specifically Rand being in a relationship with her, she just is weirdly controlling of him, and I don't know, I didn't like that, and some of the other characters as well. They just come across as like really rude or just mean. And they didn't have that in this, which honestly you'd think it would be the other way around, because usually, like in books, you get into someone's head and you see things from their perspective, so it usually makes sense when they're being rude or being a jerk or something. Whereas in this, sorry, my hair is just not doing what I want it to do today. Whereas in this, like, you don't have access to their thoughts, so you'd think it would be the other way around. But no, they're just a bit nicer to each other, which made me want to see them succeed more than in the first book. And again, these characters, they're all very well written, and I love most of them, especially for stuff that happens later in the series, but like they're just not as likable in the first book. Okay, so now for things I didn't like. First things first, the pacing is just all over the place. Like, sometimes it's fine, sometimes it's too fast and we can't understand things, sometimes it's too slow and the story just grinds to a halt, which is a big issue in the books too. And so it's all over. Like, the first episode, for instance, should have been like 15 to 20 minutes longer. Like, at the end, after the battle and everything, the characters just sort of go like, okay, I guess we'll leave, bye, and then they run off, and they don't have to like be convinced really or anything. And that was a little obnoxious. And we also just didn't get as much of a feel for what the Two Rivers is like as maybe we should have. And from what I understand, originally the showrunners wanted to do a 2-hour pilot, but Amazon just wouldn't give them the money for it. So these things happen. You work with what you have. And then similarly, the final episode should have also been like 20 or 30 minutes longer, because I feel like most of the build-up to the big climax, or climaxes I should say, because there were a couple of them, that was all pretty good, but then like the actual climaxes themselves were lackluster. Because for example, we have a big battle at the Gap, and we see the beginning of the battle with a little bit of fighting and dudes firing crossbows and stuff, and then it cuts away to some other characters doing something, and then when it cuts back, the battle's just already over, and that was, that was a little disappointing. And also, without going into spoilers here, it just was a little bit confusing what was going on at the end there, and I just think a few minutes of exposition probably could have helped that. Like, maybe not necessarily characters like just outright saying, yes, haha, this is blah, 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 this is what everything is, but like, just a little bit more explanation somewhere. And then where it's too slow, episodes 5 and 6 really should have been merged together. And those are, there's one episode which really deals with the bond between Aes Sedai and warders, and there's like funerals and stuff, and it's a good episode on its own, but it does really slow down the story and grind it to a halt for a minute, which would have been fine for one episode, but then the next episode after that deals with a lot of Aes Sedai internal politics, and that also drags things to a stop. So I just feel like those two episodes probably could have been combined, and then we could have used that time to do something else. And I mean, even then, they're not bad episodes. Like, individually, you look at them, they're pretty good, and they do get a lot of character development across. They do explore a little bit more of this world, but just having the story stop like that for 2 full episodes was really obnoxious, and I did not like it. Now, the world also could have used a bit more detail. Like, this just kind of feels like, yep, it's Fantasyland. It's kind of based on medieval Europe, but there's some other stuff mixed in there, and then there's magic, and like, it is a little bit different. And granted, the first book was similar. Like, we didn't learn all that much about this world and what it was like until later on. We learned some things about, like the Two Rivers, for instance, we got a pretty good look at, and then most of the rest of the book is just them traveling through rural Andor. And then at the end, it's like, hey, we're at Shi'Enar, and then we learn a little bit about the Blight, and, things like that. Like, we don't learn all that much in the first book, so that is something that just carried over here. But at the same time, like, things like the Blight or the relationship that Aes Sedai have with the world, like, that should have been fleshed out a little better, because we see a little bit of how the Aes Sedai interact with the rest of the world. Like, there's Tar Valon, or Tar Valon, I guess, which is where they're in charge of everything, and they're obviously very well respected. And then there's places like Shi'Enar, where they are super well liked and well respected, but they're not in charge, and they're pretty rare. And then there's obviously the White Cloaks, who just hate them and want them all dead. But then I don't think it really drove home as much as it should have, just how many people don't really know about the Aes Sedai, and so they're really wary and sometimes fearful of them. So just things like that. The world could have used a bit more of that, which is kind of why I think that those two episodes should have been combined so that we could use that time for things like this. But, it is not the end of the world, and I suppose later seasons can make up for that. And finally, I just think it looks too clean. Like, mainly with regards to the sets and costumes, like, they're well designed and everything, but they just look too clean and too nice. They don't really look like people who have been traveling for a while, or like this is the set of clothes that they've had for years and years, and so it's a little worn out, but it's well made, so it still works, And granted, I am glad that this show decided to have actual colors, like so many things that try to tell dark stories, and not that Wheel of Time is super dark, but it is a little darker than you may expect at first glance, but so many stories that try to tell dark stories think that they have to literally be dark, like The Witcher, which I'll do a video complaining about that soon, don't worry, but The Witcher, everyone is just dressed in drab and dull clothes, and it just kind of looks miserable, and I'm glad that in this, they at least decided to have a little more color and be a little brighter, but at the same time, it looks too clean, so that's why they kind of look like they're in a Renaissance fair rather than a real lived-in world. And hopefully that's something they can fix going forward. But, overall, I think that's about it for the non-spoiler section. Overall, like I said, I think it's a pretty good show so far. I look forward to seeing more. And, I have issues with it, but, so far it is a decent adaptation of Robert Jordan's works. And, if it winds up sucking either, or rather, if you think the first season sucks, or if you think it sucks later on as the show progresses, it's not like the books are going anywhere. Those are still gonna be there. We can still read them and enjoy them and talk about them. And hell, this show is gonna bring in tons of new readers anyway, so it's not that big a deal. But anyways, spoiler corner.
How high are you?
There's no one around. I can't hear anything. I'm freaking out.
Okay, so first things first, I really liked the mystery surrounding who the Dragon Reborn might be, and I liked the reveal of when we learned that it was Rand, because I just liked watching people who hadn't read the books theorize about who it might be and try and pick up on all the little clues, and it seemed to me that most of them were leaning towards Rand by the time it was revealed. But it was still a lot of fun to watch them try and figure it out, and just even if I couldn't really participate in the discussion because I don't want to give things away, it is still just, it was great. I enjoyed watching other people enjoy it, maybe not the same way I enjoyed it, but as much as I enjoyed it. And plus, there were little hints along the way that it was Rand, We had him breaking down the door in that one episode, which supposedly couldn't be broken down. There's him channeling in the ways, and it was also just kind of suspicious how everybody else had really obvious magic things going on with them, but he didn't have that. So I did like the build up to it, and then the climax where we finally realized it was him, and he's known about it for a while, but just was keeping it to himself. I enjoyed that. That was a very satisfying way of doing it, and I hope that more people who had not read the books can tell me about how they felt about it, because I think they would have been happy with it. At least I was. Now, some people did admittedly throw a hissy fit when they thought that the Dragon Reborn might be a woman, because, in this world, the characters aren't sure if the dragon's going to be a man or a woman. They're pretty sure it'll be a man, but it could be a woman, who knows? And some people just threw a fit, even though that doesn't actually change anything about the story or the world. For starters, they're not going to change who the Dragon Reborn was. People were genuinely saying that, it's not going to be Rand anymore, they're going to make it Egwene or something. No, they were never going to change something that fundamental. They wouldn't have signed off on it if it was changed that much. And by they, I mean Robert Jordan's estate and such. That would not have happened. And if you genuinely thought it happened, you're an idiot. But there's also people complaining about it who I don't think read the books, because there were people complaining about how Matt can't channel the way he could in the books, and they only changed that because they wanted to put more focus on the women characters. And I'm like, okay, so you very clearly didn't read the books. You just read a comment somewhere from somebody who probably heard something from somebody else, who probably heard it from somebody else, and now you're just getting pissed off about it without doing any further research. Like, alright, dude. And then there's a couple of people who I don't think watch the show either, because there were some people who were claiming that, oh, they changed it in the show so that the one power doesn't have two halves, like Saidin and Saidar, like, they just made it so that men make it dirty. And no, the show very clearly states that that's not the case. And even outside of the show, they did have a full Wheel of Time Origins mini short where they explained the difference between Saidin and Saidar and how Saidin was corrupted by the Dark One, so I don't think you watched the show either. This kind of reminds me of a tweet I saw the other day about The Matrix Resurrections, the new one, which I haven't seen. I don't know if it's any good. But it was just a screenshot of a YouTube video from a semi-large, obnoxious film reviewing channel. And it was just like, is The Matrix too woke? And then someone was commenting on it saying, like, these people genuinely don't care about the quality of the things they watch. They just care about whether or not it agrees with their personal viewpoints. You know, like, if it's pushing their worldview, then it's good, and if it's not pushing their worldview, then it's bad, and, well, it's really obnoxious, and those people were kind of trying to get into the Wheel of Time as well. And when their viewpoints, or rather, they didn't feel their viewpoints were being represented there, they just got pissy about it, and they got upset, and they're trying to just turn this whole thing into a front in their culture war for some reason. And, you know, the thing about these people is that they genuinely cannot interact with the world in any meaningful way. Like, I've seen some of them also, like, have to run movies and stuff by forums before they can decide if they enjoy it or not. Like, some people saying, are we allowed to like The Green Knight or not? Like, I don't know, dude. That's up to you. Like, they have to ask their hive mind before they're allowed to form their own opinions. And I would kind of feel bad for these people because that's just so pathetic, but they're also just so endlessly annoying that I kind of want them all to die. With that out of the way, I was never really expecting Billy Zane to come back and play the Dark One here, but at the same time I am a little disappointed that he didn't. Like, and I know some other people are also thinking, hey, maybe because in that terrible pilot they made years ago, Billy Zane is given a good performance there, and I think he would have been good in the show, but he wasn't. And honestly, the actor they got was pretty good. Like, I don't remember what his name is, but I know I saw him in Tyrant, and he was also in A Way Out, and actually I think he had a small role in Rogue One as well. But, you know, he's a pretty good actor, and I think he gave a solid performance here as the Dark One. Like, he feels dignified and kind of condescending, but it's just because he's so far above these other people that he really has nothing to fear from them. Like, the way he just casually shields Moiraine so she can't channel at one point. Like, he's so far above all of them. Like, while I am upset Billy Zane's not here, I'm perfectly happy with the guy they got. That said, I am a little upset that the Forsaken never show up. Like, they mention them once or twice, but at the end of the book, we do actually get, like, a battle at the Eye of the World with them, and it makes the Forsaken seem like overwhelmingly powerful foes. You know, they are the Dark One's most trusted, most powerful, most long-running servants, and they're some of the most powerful channelers in the world right now. And so, like, having them show up really makes the shadow, the dark, whatever, the evil guys seem that much more powerful. And so I would have liked if we could at least see a little bit of them, but instead we just see the Dark One at the Eye of the World, and that's a little disappointing. And finally, I think Rand and Egwene's relationship was really good. Like, the constant back and forth of will they actually be able to make this work, or will they not be able to make this work? I really liked that. You know, like, it's clear that they love each other, but they also just want different things out of life, and so long term this is just not going to work out, you know? In the first episode, we have Egwene telling Rand, like, we can't be together anymore, I'm going to train to become Village Wisdom, and that clearly hurts him a lot. But later, when she decides she's not going to be Wisdom, they can kind of reconcile that, even though, you know, she still hurt him. And then in the final episode, it's made really clear that, like, Rand just wants a simple farm life with his wife and kids, but Egwene does not want that, and so it's made pretty explicit that even if they're still together at this point, they're not going to be for very long. And they're both dealing with it in a nice, mature way. So I liked that. I don't know. I don't have a whole lot else to add there. I don't think we see a lot of relationships that end in healthy ways on television, and it's nice to see that once in a while. So that's it. Wheel of Time show is pretty good. If you're somebody who gets upset that they cast black people in the show, or if you're somebody that gets upset that women have prominent roles, then I don't think I'm going to change your mind here. But if you're somebody who's just on the fence about it, then I'd still say check it out. If you're somebody who's just not into fantasy, I don't know if this will change your mind. What I will say is that it's more Lord of the Rings than Game of Thrones. You know, a bunch of reviewers and stuff keep comparing it to Game of Thrones, and I find that annoying because while it is grim and violent the way Game of Thrones is, it doesn't really deal with sex all that much, and just in terms of the type of story it's trying to tell and the type of world it takes place in and the type of characters that are there, it's much closer to Lord of the Rings or more traditional epic fantasy. So if just temper your expectations, you know, just whatever you're looking for, that's what this show is. So I don't know, just it's pretty good. Check it out. Hi guys, Editor James here with one last quick note. I noticed at the very, very end of the season when Moiraine is talking about the Quendiar and saying, like, hey, this is supposed to be unbreakable, I don't understand what is going on here. I was a little confused by that at first, but after thinking over it for a little while, I realized that that's supposed to be one of the seals to the Dark One's prison, and Rand was tricked into breaking it. Now, I think that's actually a pretty big improvement over the book, where they just sort of found the seal and it was already broken. But the fact that it was so confusing that I didn't understand that until several days after I first watched this episode is kind of an indictment. Hello and aloha. Thank you so much for watching this far. If you see all these names here, these are my patron guys. Over on Patreon, they send me money once a month, and they get access to stuff like early videos and get to vote on polls and, you know, other fun stuff. And all their names are here. My $10 and up patrons are Oppo Savalainen, Eris Targaryen, Olivia Rayan, Brother Santodes, Buffy Valentine, Carolina Clay, Dan Antselievich, Dark King, Echo, Karkat Kitsune, Liza Rudakova, Lord Tiebreaker, Madison Lewis Bennett, Marilyn Roxy, Matthew Bourdreau, Michael Weingartner, Microphone, Peep the Toad, Return of Cardamom, Sad Mardigan, Sillier the Vixen, Tobacco Crow, Tom Beanie, and Vay Victus. They're all great. If you want to get your name up here, consider donating to my Patreon. If you don't feel like doing that, you could also become a YouTube channel member, or just rate the video, comment, and subscribe on it. You know, I appreciate all of you for getting this far. Goodbye, and shalom. You know, I'm not the first person to say this, but there are so many things that we consider classics today that if they came out today, reactionaries would try and cancel them. Like, you know, like Avatar The Last Airbender, for instance. Like, the first bit of dialogue in that show is Katara calling out Sokka for being a misogynist, and then he has a whole story arc later where they're on Kyoshi Island, and he has to learn to realize, oh yeah, okay, I am a misogynist, I need to fix my ways. And then later they get to the North Pole, and there's another thing about that. And then there's stuff like Aliens, where Ripley survives while all the soldiers die, and then she fights the alien queen, and you know these people, if this movie came out today, would just be going, oh, okay, all these trained soldiers die, but Mary Sue over here gets to live. Like, that's just what they complain about. And of course, the Wheel of Time books, like, they'd be complaining because so many of the societies portrayed here are matriarchal in nature, even though a pretty big part of the books is that matriarchal societies are just as bullshit as patriarchal ones, and women are just as fallible as men when they're in leadership positions. Like, you'd think they'd be into that, but no, like, they just... Back then, they didn't have the outrage machine built that they have now, and they weren't quite addicted to the outrage yet. You know what I mean? Because that's what it is. They are addicted to outrage. They just want to shoot up heroin while thinking about how the world is so mean to them.